Yamunatiravanachari Yamunatiravanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. That's without the coupler. It's got a coupler. I like this one so much. I'm going to take it with me. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Today we will take a look at Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 27, and today's text 16. Okay, I find out that I need to ask this as I'm running around, because everyone has a different tradition. Do we do word by word before we do the whole pada? Either or. Well, maybe to save time, I won't do that this time. Evaṁ pratyavamṛśyāsāv. ātmānaṁ pratipadyate. Sāhaṅkārasya dravyasya. Vasthānam anugrahaḥ. evaṁ pratyavamṛśyāsāv. ātmānaṁ pratipadyate. Sāhaṅkārasya dravyasya. vasthānam anugrahaḥ. evaṁ pratyavamṛśyāsāv. ātmānam pratipadyate. Sāhaṅkārasya dravyasya. vasthānam anugrahaḥ. Others, please. Vaishnavis? Everybody? Word to word. Evam, thus, pratyavamṛśyā, after understanding. Asau, that person. Ātmānaṁ, his self. Pratipadyate, realizes. Sa-ahaṅkārasya, accepted under false ego. Dravyasya, of the situation. Ya, who. Avasthānam, resting place. Anugrahaḥ, the manifester. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. When, by mature understanding, one can realize his individuality, then the situation he accepts under false ego becomes manifest to him. Responsively, please. When, by mature understanding, one can realize his individuality, then the situation he accepts under false ego becomes manifest to him. Srila Prabhupada's purport. The Māyāvādī philosopher's position is that at the ultimate issue, the individual is lost. Everything becomes one, and there's no distinction between the knower, the knowable, and knowledge. But by minute analysis, we can see that this is not correct. Individuality is never lost, even when one thinks that the three different principles, namely the knower, the knowable, and the knowledge, are amalgamated or merged into one. The very concept that the three merge into one another is another form of knowledge. And since the perceiver of knowledge still exists, how can one say that the knower, knowledge, and knowable have become one? The individual soul who is perceiving this knowledge still remains an individual. Both in material existence and in spiritual existence, the individuality continues. The only difference is in the quality of the identity. In the material identity, the false ego acts, and because of false identification, one takes things to be different from what they actually are. That is the basic principle of conditional life. Similarly, when the false ego is purified, one takes everything in the right perspective. That is the state of liberation. It is stated in the Isha Upanishad that everything belongs to the Lord. Ishavāsyam idam sarvam. Everything exists on the energy of the Supreme Lord. This is also confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. Because everything is produced of His energy and exists on His energy, the energy is not different from Him. But still the Lord declares, I am not there. When one clearly understands one's constitutional position, everything becomes manifest. False egoistic acceptance of things conditions one, whereas acceptance of things as they are makes one liberated. The example is given in the previous verse is applicable here. Due to absorption of one's identity in his money, when the money's lost, he thinks that he's also lost. But actually, he's not identical with the money, nor does the money belong to him. When the actual situation is revealed, we understand that the money does not belong to any individual person or living entity, nor is it produced by man. Ultimately, the money is the property of the Supreme Lord, and there's no question of its being lost. But as long as one falsely thinks I am the enjoyer or I am the Lord, this concept of life continues and one remains conditioned. As soon as this false ego is eliminated, one is liberated. As confirmed in the Bhagavatam, situation in one's real constitutional position is called mukti, or liberation. Om Jnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukhaṁ Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langhayate Girim Jatkripa Tamahang Bande Shri Gurun Dinataranam Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah evaṁ pratyavamṛśyāsāv ātmānaṁ pratipadyate sa-ahaṅkārasya dravyasya vasthānam anugrahaḥ. When by mature understanding one can realize his individuality, then the situation he accepts under false ego becomes manifest to him. There are a couple of points that we should attend to in this verse and purport. The first is Srila Prabhupada very eloquently refutes the Māyāvādī perspective, that when we become realized, our individuality is merged into the knowing and the object of knowledge and all those sorts of things. He just points out very simply, how do we define true eloquence according to a Bengali proverb that we find in Chaitanya Charitamrita Maharaj? Yes. Mitang cha sadam cha vacho hivagmitaha. Essential truth spoken concisely is what we call eloquence. So I'm kind of the opposite. I have to worry very much about the clock. I guess I'm sometimes thinking, why use 100 words when 1,000 words will do the job? Which is the opposite of what we should be doing. So Srila Prabhupada very eloquently makes this point, that there's still someone knowing, and there's still something they know, and that knowledge is there. The individuality is there, both in material life and in spiritual life. But as she points out in his purport, the quality of that individuality is something very different in the liberated stage. Another thing I noticed is that Srila Prabhupada refers to the previous verse. The language in these two verses reminds me of the third sutra of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. So the first Yoga Sutra says, now yoga. Now we're going to talk about yoga. Second sutra, he tells us what yoga is about. Yogas chitta vritti nirodha. And in the third, he says, tata swarupe drashtu vasthānam. Then, the seer, he refers to the jiva as the seer, as we see in text 15, sa-ahaṅkārasya drashta. And this is then the seer can abide in its real form, in its real situation. In other words, we can realize our situation as consciousness, which means yoga is about attaining a kind of liberation. Ultimately, the goal of yoga is to see the supersoul. Have I done this pop quiz before? Percentage of Yoga Sutras that actually address asana. There's nothing about Lululemons in the Yoga Sutras, but I haven't done this? Oh, cool. So, any guesses as to what percentage? Oh, Maharaj. Let's see if anybody else gets it first. What's the percentage of words in the Yoga Sutras that address asana? You don't remember? Oh, you do remember. 1%. Out of 1,200 words, 11 or 12 words address asana. Why asana? Because we have to be fit enough to sit and meditate for long periods of time. That's it. And there's this elaborate process of meditation. And then at the end, he says, you can do all this, or else you can do Ishvara Pranidhana. You can just surrender to the Supreme Controller. Krishna gives a similar instruction to Uddhava in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam. The 14th chapter, where he describes the process of, Prabhupada calls it the process of mystic yoga. And he gives instructions just as we see in the Yoga Sutras, just as we see in the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And where did we read this recently? Where was I? San Diego? The third canto coming up. I think 6th canto, there's something that we were reading in the 6th canto, one of the places I was visiting. And so the same kind of thing. Secluded place, sacred place, even better. That's what we read the other day. Not a lot of people around, a seat that's not too high, not too low. You've got a deer skin and a soft cloth, maybe a kusha grass mat. You sit with your head and neck erect. Fix your attention somewhere. One place it says the tip of the nose. And you envision this form of the Lord. And Krishna gives Uddhava a very elaborate description of the Lord's form, including his ornaments. Very similar to the description that Narada Muni gives to Dhruva Maharaj in the 4th canto. And he says, so you meditate on this entire form, and then you focus your attention on his face, and then you shift it to space, and then you forget the whole thing and just take shelter of me. So Patanjali kind of says that you can do all this rigmarole, or you can just surrender to the Supreme Controller. So we've got this very kind of yogic language here. We've got the drashtu here, and then we have this avasthānam, understanding his situation. However, here the situation's that's being recognized is a little different. The goal of yoga is to recognize our situation as pure spirit soul, as consciousness. But here, what he's suggesting is when by mature understanding we can realize our individuality. In other words, we just have to be a little thoughtful. Introspection is an important part of practicing yoga, including bhakti yoga. I've sometimes made the point that the devotees living in the ashram not only need plenty of service, but they also need space in their days and in their consciousness, in their hearts, for their spiritual practice, and then reflecting on what they experience through their service and through their sadhana. Also, part of yoga, they need to be regulated, as Krishna says in the 6th chapter, in their habits of eating, sleeping, working, and recreation. That's something that we miss sometimes. Regulated. It's not like where I live. It's not like you go surfing all day. You go out for an hour, hour and a half maybe, and then you come back and just go into your service. You go out for half an hour and you end up staying out for an hour and a half if it's any good. This is the yogic situation. There needs to be reflection. There needs to be time for introspection, for actually understanding our situation. Now, another thing that I noticed is at the beginning of the 2nd paragraph, Srila Prabhupada cites the first text of the Isha Upanishad, Ishavasya Medam Sarvam We used to all chant this every day, Sanskrit and English, and I'm so rusty. Yatkincha Jagatyam Jagat. So that everything, and Srila Prabhupada's translation makes it clear, whether it's animate or inanimate, everything is situated in the Lord. Everything is the Lord's. And this is what we learn in the first half of the second canto. This is really the first lesson, big lesson that we get from Srimad Bhagavatam. That everything, in a sense, is God. Because it's God's. So what we see in the first, at the beginning of those first 6 chapters of the second canto is instruction in how to see the world, and one way to see the absolute truth, to see the Supreme Lord in the world. So we're given a universal form to meditate on for kind of spiritual beginners. The mountains are his bones, the rivers are his veins, sun and the moon are his eyes, etc. That's a way to see the Lord everywhere. But what we're actually seeing, what we're shown as we get toward the end of that part of the canto, is what apparently is the oldest philosophy in the world, the original philosophy, the real perennial philosophy. And that is, there is a sense in which everything is God, because God is in everything. And at the same time, he's completely aloof. This philosophy in the West is called panentheism, that God is at the same time immanent and transcendent. He interpenetrates everything, and he has his own life at the same time. We can't do that. Our life gets messed up if we don't somehow or other compartmentalize our work life from our family life, from our spiritual life. If we let our work life take everything over, then we become a lousy father and husband. If we let our family life take everything over, then sometimes we're negligent of our work. So we need to. This was something that I struggled with all the years I was working. My work was pretty labor intensive. I taught college writing, sometimes on 3 campuses at a time, each semester. And I was really working way too much. But I kept trying to figure out, what am I looking for? Am I looking for balance between, among my work life, my spiritual life, and my home life? Or am I looking for some sort of integrity? I ultimately got the answer. I was never able to really figure it out. But I ultimately got the answer when everything else was taken away from me. my professional life, my family life, So, and then I realized, okay, so ultimately it's integrity. Ultimately everything has to be, the service is the focus, and everything else will follow. So we have this sense that Krishna is in everything, and everything's in Krishna, and at the same time he's aloof. And this is really spiritual vision. This is the vision the Bhagavatam wants to give us from the get-go. And the last of those chapters, the 6th chapter, is called Purusha Sukta Confirmed, where Shukadeva Goswami very clearly presents the philosophy of Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva. Simultaneous difference and non-difference. Oneness and distinction. And where does it come from? Well, according to the title of the chapter, it comes from the Purusha Sukta prayers, which are part of the Rig Veda, which is the first of the Vedas. So this is the original philosophy. This is the real perennial philosophy. And then the last thing is that our understanding of who we are. If we think, he says, due to absorption of our identity and our money, when the money's lost, we think that we're also lost. But we're not identical with the money. And so we tend to identify with, well, I don't know, all sorts of different things to the extent that we identify with our body, right? So I'm an old white American man. Oh, well, that's about the end of it. All the other stuff is gone. You used to think, okay, fifth generation Californian, English professor, I belong to this lady and these young women, and this is my house, all these different things. But those things are gone. And I persist. So at one point I might have been thinking, who the heck am I if I'm not living with this Vaishnavi? Who the heck am I if I'm not living in this little house in the country on the big island? Who am I if I'm not, grading papers in the middle of the night? Well, this is who I am. I'm the servant of the Vaishnavas. So my individuality's not lost, and I got an even better job with, I got to say it, even better pay. There's generally not many dollars involved, but a lot of affection, a lot of trust, a lot of responsibility. So this is an opportunity for me to maybe actually grow up, kind of leave the Peter Pan thing behind and become a grown-up. I remember when Srila Prabhupada, when he gave me second initiation, he said, this means more responsibility on Krishna's behalf. And I've tried to take that seriously. And some of you, I may have mentioned to some of you that this accepting sannyas wasn't my idea, that I was shaken literally out of bed in the middle of the night. And Srila Prabhupada's concern was, he looked at me, he says, so, what are you doing? It's like kind of halfway between checking up on me and calling me out. So I explained, I teach English at a local college. My wife and I have a nice program at our home every morning, and we do so many projects with all the devotees who live on the island and have a nice position in the community. And Prabhupada looked at me and he says, that's nice, but I wanted you to teach this Krishna consciousness cult. And then he said, you're not a boy any longer. Now it's time for you to give. So I've been trying to take that responsibility seriously over the last few years. So I have my real identity. What is my real identity? Nahang vipro nacha narapatir, napi vaishana shudro, nahang barni nacha gruhapatir, navanasto yatirva, kintu prodina kela paramananda purnam ritabder gopi bhartu, parakamalaya dasa. I'm not any of whatever labels I might have picked up. We have that pramana verse at the beginning of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, where Srila Rupa Goswami tells us what pure devotional service means. Uttama Bhakti, he calls it there. Shuddha Bhakti, we might say elsewhere. Anyabhilashita shunyam jnana karmadinavritam anukulyena krishna anushlilam bhakti ruttama. And so it's not identifying with all these, it's not hankering after liberation or stuff or whatever it is that we become so accustomed to over so many lifetimes in this material world. But it's anukulyena krishna anushlilam, ongoing activity intended to give pleasure to Krishna. And then the pramana verse is sarvo padhi vinirmuktam tatpadatrena nirmalam. So I used to joke sometimes, it says sarvo padhi vinirmuktam, not some upadhi. Give them all up, all the labels, flush them. And hrishikena hrishikesha sevanam bhakti ruchite. What we call bhakti is engaging our senses in trying to give pleasure to the master of the senses. So this is my real identity. It always has been. And because of the opportunity to reflect on things afforded by my beloved spiritual master and his followers, who pretty much literally dragged me out of the ocean of birth and death, out of the ocean too. I've been able to actually begin to understand this, that the real satisfaction in life is our service to the Vaishnavas. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, one of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's songs, maybe it's Nadia Gogumi Nityanam Mahajan, he says, the essence of religion is, Krishna Nam, Krishna, Jive Doya Krishna Nam Sarvadharmasar. Compassion to living entities and chanting the holy names is the essence of religion. Elsewhere we see essence of religion is Krishna Nam Vaishnava Seva, Sarvadharmasar, serving the devotees. Krishna Nam Jive Doya Vaishnava Seva, that's the essence of religion. So Srila Prabhupada has given us the opportunity to reflect on this. I recently saw an old, well, I guess it was like an old Facebook post that comes up and you share it again, of one devotee I know that kind of showed that there was a turn in their life and at this particular point. And I recognize that. There's this, there's a turn in our lives. And I remember I remember kind of where my life was when I actually met the devotees back in 1969 at that Jimi Hendrix concert in Honolulu. And somehow or other, even having had some exposure to the Maha Mantra, usually, mostly although not by devotees. I think I first heard the Maha Mantra on the soundtrack of Hair, the tribal rock opera that was very popular back in the late 60s. And that was for me the catchiest song in the whole musical. I liked all the other songs. I liked that they were a little naughty. I liked the political stuff. I liked the, in-your-face kind of stuff. But somehow or other, what ran around in my head was the Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. And when I heard devotees chanting it, it was like a revelation. I could not move. I couldn't go. The friends that I had gone to that concert with, they went off and hung out and did something else. I stayed with the kirtan party until the cops broke us up and never forgot that impression. And then a few months later, I moved into the temple just before Gaur Purnima in 1970. And another person who had been at that concert, who had met the devotees at that concert, moved into the temple on the same day. That's Kusha Devi, my little twin sister, I call her. So that, that turn in our lives, that's something that we should note. Sometimes we get a little impatient when devotees get really self-indulgent with this how I came to Krishna consciousness things. But the devotees should pay attention to how it was. How it was Krishna consciousness came into our lives. What was our situation? What was the situation? Who were the devotees? On Facebook, there's a group of Prabhupada disciples. And when they invite someone into the group, they ask them, where did you meet the devotees? When and where did you meet the devotees? When were you initiated? And where? When and where did you meet the devotees? And who was the first devotee who introduced you to Krishna consciousness? And I think that's a wonderful question. I'll tell you mine, Turiya Das. He was at that concert, and later when I would chant on the other side of Kalakaua Avenue, because I didn't want to get too close to the devotees, I turned around one night, and he was standing there at my elbow waiting for me. And he got me to come down to the Sunday feast the next day, and that was kind of the beginning of the end. So we should pay attention to those things and never lose our gratitude for that turn in our lives. I'm going to stop here before the hook comes. Is there any discussion, comments, questions? Bhrigapati Prabhu? Well, I can say this. It happened at night in bed. I sat up in bed shaking with tears running down my eyes at a little after 2 o'clock in the morning. I was completely freaked out. So you could say it was a dream because it was at night in bed, but there weren't any of the weird things. That's all, those little anomalies that always, oh yeah, it was a dream because, there was this and that. This just didn't fit. There was none of that. And the sensory and emotional experience of the dream, they were both very vivid. And it shook me. And as I went immediately into my office and wrote it down in my journal so that I wouldn't lose a detail. And the whole time I was reflecting on the talk that Srila Prabhupada gave in 1968 on the occasion of his sannyas guru's disappearance, Bhakti Pragyan Keshava Maharaj. And Prabhupada said, Guru Maharaj was calling me out, and he says, I was a little horrified. And you can hear, if you hear the recording of that, you can hear in his voice, there's no hyperbole there. He's not putting anything on. His voice quavers when he says that, however many years it was later. And so I kept reflecting on that. And I remember hearing that, noticing, I think I first heard that talk in 1970, and I'd been reflecting on that ever since. And then I thought, okay, now I know what he's talking about. And then everything else just changed in my life after that to make it impossible to neglect. I tried. I didn't say anything to anybody for a long time, but things just started, some things falling apart, other things falling into place. It was a little weird. Kids, don't try this at home. Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Maharaj, very nice class, very deep, very thoughtful, very logical class. Thank you very much. My question is, what is the best way in our devotional life, like sadhaka, to realize then we are actually different for our fourth ego? What's the best way?
That we are eternal?
Yeah, that we are separate from fourth ego, then we have our individuality.
Well, Srila Prabhupada's simple example was, he talked about, my hand, my foot, my nose, or things like that. We don't say I nose. But we can also reflect, what's my earliest memory? I can remember being 4 or 5 years old. And that's a long time ago. I'm 77 now. I can remember being 4 or 5. I can remember being 7. I can remember being a real pain in the neck at 10 and 11, even bigger pain in the neck in some ways at 16. Oh God, I remember 16. I wish I could forget it. And I remember being 21, 22 when my life when my life took that turn. And I'm the same person experiencing these things. It's a shock sometimes to look in the mirror. When you put your tilak on, you look at, well, who the heck is that old geezer there? Who's that? I remember once visiting my dad. Probably, I think this was 83, and he had a picture. He had my graduation picture, my high school graduation picture, on a shelf in his office. And I remember walking past that, seeing that picture, and thinking, "Wait, who's that?" And then I actually picked the picture up. I went into the bathroom and stood next to the mirror, and I was looking at it. And at that time, 83, so I was like maybe 35 or something, And even then, I just thought, okay, I think I get 2 eyes, 2 ears, a nose, a mouth. There's some resemblance there, but that's one way. But we can, I think that's the easiest way for us, just to kind of remind ourselves, that I really am part and parcel of Krishna. Part and parcel, Srila Prabhupada uses it a noun phrase, but more generally, it's used as an adjective phrase, which describes something that's very similar in nature or composition to something else. So, and sometimes I've seen Srila Prabhupada actually use it as an adjective phrase too, that we are part and parcel of the Lord in that we have the same, many of the same qualities as the Lord, just in much smaller quantity. I think that's a good reflection for us all the time. In old pictures, pictures from classical times, well, not in the classical times, Renaissance times, a very common thing that you'll see in a portrait of a scholar or a thinker will be a memento mori. Usually, quite often, it'll be a skull on their desk. Memento mori means a reminder of death. Death's coming. My body's going to end. I'm different from that body. And if we actually reflect, we can see so many ways that we're different from our bodies. That's a start. Does it help at all? You're going to let me off. You're going to be gracious and let me off the hook before the hook comes. Is there anything else? Thank you all so much for your patience. Thank you for your questions. Grantaraja Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.